that out of the way, let's get into this surprisingly good quarterback duel between Patrick Mahomes and Bryce Young. Now, as we both know, I'm sure all of you guys know if you paid attention to football, Patrick Mahomes has not been playing well this season, or at least not playing to his standards that we usually expect Patrick Mahomes to play at. And Bryce Young, for the most part, he has not really lived up to that high draft pick that and sort of messiah to the Panthers like a lot of people expected. I mean, everyone sort of expected Bryce Young to emerge as a really competent quarterback in this league, and at least in the first season that he played, it didn't really happen. And all the attention was on CJ Stroud and how much better he was than Bryce Young. And now it seems like, at least at this moment, the tables have turned. I mean, last week in week 12, I mentioned how CJ Stroud, he ended up losing that game, but he played worse than Will Levis, who's been through most of the season has been a joke, at least in the beginning of the season. And so the fact that he got completely outplayed by Will Levis and was one of the big reasons why the Texans ended up losing, and now Bryce Young almost outduels Patrick Mahomes and that ridiculous Chiefs defense. Now it seems like, the conversations, the conversations have sort of flipped itself in whether or not Bryce Young is actually going to be the starting quarterback of the future for the Panthers. Now, in this game, Mahomes completed 27 of his 37 passes, threw 3 touchdowns, and did not throw an interception. And we're usually used to Patrick Mahomes throwing his what is that interception in the game. Like, literally, that's what I like to call it, because it's like we barely ever see Mahomes make mistakes, aside from this season where we're seeing him make a lot of mistakes, and those interceptions are like, what on earth was that? Like, what was that? What was going on? And the other players on the game, Kareem Hunt ended with 68 rushing yards. There were no rushing touchdowns in this game. All of the touchdowns were passing touchdowns from Patrick Mahomes. And Noah Gray ended with 2 passing touchdowns, with 2 receiving touchdowns, And DeAndre Hopkins ended with another touchdown as well. All of them were thrown by Patrick Mahomes, obviously. And on the Panthers side, Bryce Young, he ended the game completing 21 of his 35 passes for 263 yards, and he also threw for another touchdown. And obviously, Chuba Hubbard ended with a rushing touchdown on the night as well. And they scored 2 touchdowns in this game, compared to the Chiefs scoring 3. So there were a lot of field goals taking place. And I mean, the numbers, aside from the 3 passing touchdowns to 1 passing touchdown, the yards that Bryce Young was able to generate through the air, they were almost on par with Patrick Mahomes' yards through the air, right? Now, the game went like this. Kansas City opened up with a touchdown, then the Panthers responded with a field goal, where the Chiefs answered back with a field goal. Then the Panthers responded with a field goal, then the Chiefs answered with a field goal. Then the Panthers punted, and then the Chiefs ended up scoring a touchdown to make the score 20-6, and then the Panthers, to end the first half, ended with a field goal. Now, when the score was 20-9, I just immediately assumed that the Chiefs defense was going to hold up. I mean, it was just Bryce Young, and they hadn't been able to score a touchdown at all in the first half. So I didn't really expect the game to end the way that it did, and the game to be this close. And I was expecting the Chiefs to either not necessarily run up the scoreboard, but I was expecting them to keep this game, not keep this game close. That's what I meant to say. But to open up the third quarter, the Panthers opened up with a touchdown to make the score 20-16. But then the Chiefs opened up with a touchdown and answered right back to make the score 27-16. And then the Panthers ended up taking a field goal. Then both teams exchanged punts. The Chiefs ended up punting one more time. And then on the Panthers' final drive, they ended up scoring a touchdown to tie the game 27-27. However, there was too much time left on the clock for Patrick Mahomes to be Patrick Mahomes. And They ended up actually, excuse me, they did not score a field goal. They ended up converting on a 2-point conversion. The Panthers, they ended up converting on a 2-point conversion thanks to Chuba Hubbard, and they tied the score 27-27. I knew my math was off, but then the Chiefs, they had the ball last, and usually when you give the ball to Patrick Mahomes last, like, there's really no return. Like, there's a big chance that Mahomes is going to just seal the game right there, never give you the ball back, and you're going to lose because you just did not get a chance to touch the ball. And that's exactly what happened. The Chiefs, they ended up holding the ball for the final minute and 46 seconds, and they ended up winning with a field goal. So it was really like the big reason why the Panthers ended up losing this game was because they did not get a chance to touch the ball again. And now it's looking like the quarterback situation, at least from the last few games that we've seen Bryce Young play in, it would look like the situation is fixing itself. Because when Bryce Young, at least in the beginning of the season with Bryce Young, he was absolutely awful. And he was so bad that he ended up getting benched. I mean, throughout this season, he's thrown 6 interceptions and he's only thrown 5 touchdowns. And obviously, he was benched for a little bit. But those interceptions and those touchdowns that he threw, I mean, like, it's a very bad touchdown to interception ratio. And let me just go ahead and just look at these games. Just to make sure that I'm right. So after he finally got back into the starting lineup with going up against the Saints, he threw 1 touchdown and then he threw 1 interception. So again, pretty bad mistake there. But the backup quarterback for the Panthers, I mean, he looked like Andy Dalton looked like he would be a little bit better, but again, it was only a matter of time before he continued regressing and turning back into the Andy Dalton that a lot of people know. And that was when everyone was like, at least it was really against the Commanders. That was when the Panthers were like, all right, we might as well keep starting Bryce Young because maybe he'll develop into a much more solid quarterback than what he is. And so far, it seems like it's working to their benefit. Like, despite the fact that he threw an interception against the Saints, they did end up winning the game in the end. Obviously, we know that they beat the Giants, but it's not really that difficult to beat the Giants. And now he puts up a really solid game against the Chiefs. So, is Bryce Young going to stay the starter for the Panthers? Personally, I'm not really a big fan of Bryce Young. I don't think he's really that competent of a quarterback, to be playing long term. I'm not going to say that he was bad in this one against the Chiefs because that would be ridiculous. I mean, the Chiefs' defense is one of the best in the league, and he was able to tie the game, and the reason why they ended up losing was because they never touched the ball again. Now, despite this, however, I don't think this is something that the Panthers are going to want to live with long term. Now, I'm not a big fan of Bryce Young. I don't think he's that good of a quarterback. Like, while he does have his moments, he also has a big problem with him is his height. I mean, he can barely see over the offensive line, and doing that makes it a little bit more difficult to read defenses. And some of his throws are like, what on earth is that? And I don't know. Like, I'm just not that big on Bryce Young. And like a lot of people, they might say maybe you're being a little bit too harsh. And like, he did not have a really good situation for him on the Panthers in his first year. But to that, I say that was the reason why he was drafted number 1 in the draft. That was the reason why he was picked so high. Because they expected him to be a difference maker, and he hasn't really shown that he can be a difference maker throughout his time on the Panthers. So I don't really think this is something that is going to stick with him long term. And this performance, I think this was a little bit of a fluke performance going up against the Chiefs, but it's still an argument like worth discussing. It's still on the table that he can be a solid quarterback. So I'm not going to completely shove it away, even though I don't think it's going to pan out the way that a lot of people are hoping that it will. But that's all that I have in this second segment. So now we're going to go ahead and go into the third segment where I do a quick injury update on most of the, again, well, most of them, not all of them, at least, most of the important players that we have updates for on the injury and when they're expected to return. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.